director of the W.E. Du Bois Center at UMass.
Yay. So I just have a couple of questions here, mostly like, questions, start conversations, things like that. That basically ask, how would your life, as an academic person aspiring to be an academic or someone that you're doing right now, in the grad students here, black feminism in academia and also in your personal life, and how you think of black feminist ideologies, how you apply them to your life, and how it changes over outcome and all things like that. So I guess we can start with, it's like it's not basic. Like, so how do you personally define the term black feminism? And what does it mean to you? Because there's academic definitions and things like that. But anyone else would
So there's a lot of definitions out there. I'm teaching, of course, now Black women, power and representation in Africa and African diaspora, and that's what we do. The first part of the class is speak about, learn about some of these different ideas. But for me, I like to pull kind of important principles from the Comfort River Collective and some other theorists to think about some key components of Black feminism. For me, are the emphasis on women, on really making sure that we emphasize that Black women, above and beyond, first and foremost, are human beings and need to be respected as such. The second being this emphasis on the collective approach. Really, Black feminism is not just about liberating Black women just for Black women's sake. It's really about the protection of the community, the larger community. And so many Black feminist writers emphasize the importance of being collective as opposed to this individual kind of approach. And then also self-definition is another thing I think is important in Black feminism. Really, it being important for Black women to define themselves for themselves instead of being boxed in by the stereotypes and ideas that other people are trying to impress upon them and put them in these small boxes that then have real implications for their lives and policy direction and everything. So those are the three important principles I think I would highlight for me, for my
I would just define it as a theory and a practice that advocates for the liberatory values or the centering of those who are impacted by racism and sexism, and what that could look like is a lens or a way that you view the rights and the advocacy of Black women. And I also understand feminism. I think sometimes, like as Dr. Covington Ford said, there are a lot of definitions and things out there. And I think sometimes like there's like this perception that only women can be feminists or only Black women can be Black feminists or whatever the case might be, whereas men can be feminists. And it's a lens of viewing the advocacy for the rights of those impacted by racism and sexism. I believe Black women's rights in particular. So yeah, that's how I view it, and it means what it means to me is being a Black who is impacted by racism and sexism, and the ways in which those systems are affecting the way I can navigate or have navigated society on a daily basis, institutionally and personally.
I think that I think of Black feminism as a multifaceted lens in which I view my life or my situations, my scenarios at all times. And so I actually identify as a Black lesbian feminist, which is an additional lens that is necessary for my lifestyle, my orientation, and my positionality in the world. So when I'm thinking about Black feminism, people always ask me, like, oh, well, since you're this, you're that, and that, like, which one's more important to you? Like, which identity is, like, the forefront? And I'm always like, I don't get to choose Black and Black today. So I guess I'm going to have to say all of it at the same time. And when I think about, I think multifaceted. I like the word practices. I like the word embodiment when I'm thinking about Black feminism specifically, because this informs the way that I live my life. This is in every interaction that I have. It's in every choice that I make. It's a state of consciousness for me. I would say Black feminism is a state of consciousness. I'm always conscious of my race. I'm always conscious of my gender. I'm always conscious of my sexuality.
because each one of us live Black feminism differently. So that's where I start from. However, going back a little teeny bit, I came to Black feminism, I would say reluctantly, as in coming from Africana studies, Black studies, history, sort of, and how I realized that I was defining myself for many years as a womanist, and then, which is a term, speaking of lavender, lavender is the purple, coined by Alice Walker, right, in terms of womanism. However, because I felt like feminism wasn't, I'm my mother's child, and growing up in the 70s, 80s, her relationship with the feminist movement, the white feminist movement, was one of, yes, choose which, are you a woman now, or are you gonna do the civil rights thing, right? So for her, womanism made more sense, but then when I decided to go into academia, I realized that the words matter. So I'm a feminist, but I'm a Black feminist. Therefore, it's an academic, it is a theory, it is an exercise, it is how you live, your embodiment of it. But it's especially pushing people that you have to interact with in this realm, students, graduate students, or colleagues, to really consider how you live, Black and woman. So in that sense, that's why I said I came to it reluctantly, and I think that's why I can wholeheartedly kind of embrace it, because I realized it was a tool. Not that the master's tools will ever tear down the master's house. However, I'm still gonna hold the tool right here, just, it's a long tool and it's sharp. So.
Right. Literally. Does anyone have any questions yet? Feel free to just raise your hands whenever.
Oh, I have a question. Yeah. I know y'all differently, but how are you?
Excuse me?
I want to know, we live in some times, it's a dynamic campus, y'all are Black women, so you know how that story goes. How are you?
This is heavy.
I thank you for asking the question.
Yeah. No one asks us. 92%.
I would say I'm learning, but there's so many things that are coming down that it feels overwhelming. Black studies in general is often looked at. This is a moment that's very heightened. Just aware of that, how it's affecting my department, my students, my faculty, but also our larger communities. It's not just a
I had to wrestle with this in my brain and wonder why this was giving me so much pause. Because what I'm realizing in this moment is that maybe I'm not okay. Primarily because I have a sense of why you guys said, right? Like in our current socio-political times, there's been a lot that's been happening in the news cycle and in the world, the country, and institutions, and all things are in relationship to a lot of the work that we do. And so when the election cycle was happening, November 5th and that, it was like one of those periods of time where I genuinely got excited, like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. I was like, we can do this, and there was so much of a charge, with all of these organizations and all this backing, these Zoom calls that happened immediately in July, and there was just so much, and there was just everything, it just felt like everything that we had been hoping for and reaching for and just wanting. It just seemed like it was within reach. And then November 5th happened. And I think I got woken up like several times out of my sleep. Like my best friend is a PhD student at UCLA, and so they're 3 hours behind, and he's like calling me, it's like 3 a.m. and he's like, "Are you watching the news?" And I'm like, "No, I'm asleep." He's like, he's winning, and I was like, "Yo, are you serious?" I was like, "I'm gonna go back to sleep and pretend like this is a nightmare, or this is just a dream, whatever." And I woke up and of course what happened. So at that point, I became so deflated. I am realizing like I have completely checked out. Like anytime anyone is like, "Oh my gosh, you see what he's doing?" I was like, I actually haven't watched it. Like I understand that that's probably not the best way to go about things or whatever, but there was just so much of there was such an expectation, there was such a belief that it was within reach. And to be that high, the only way you can go is down when you are disappointed. And like rock bottom down, And so like since then, I'm like I'm not actively been trying to engage, or like breaking news comes across all of my apps and my emails and stuff on social media pops up, and I just go right past it because I was like, for the sake of my own mental health, I am not going to sit here and re-traumatize myself by thinking about and actively like engaging with like the worries and the stresses and just of what is happening. I understand that in some ways that is a privileged thing to do. Like some people can't afford to not think about what's happening right now. So I acknowledge that. I acknowledge how that can come off, but there was such an excitement that was like birthed in I think myself and a lot of Black women that this was possible, and when it didn't happen, I think for me it kind of just set me into a state of like checking out, just for the sake of keeping my own peace.
Yeah, heavy on that. I also want to introduce a different blend of energy into this conversation, because I've been feeling a lot that my emotions have been inappropriate. And I say the word inappropriate because as Black women, they assume I must be so horrified all the time. I must be so oppressed and downtrodden and deflated and defeated and all these words. And yes, on one hand I am. I have been. You know that on the election night, I'm not a person who cries often, but the floodgates just released for a myriad of things. I was crying for myself. I was crying for my people, my country, all the marginalized identities that I love and supported, my friends, my international friends. Like, I was crying for everybody. Those tears were very potent. But I was going through a lot during the election cycle, and I was a shell of myself. I was actually taking Dr. Covington Ward's class, and she would come up to me afterwards and be like, "Are you all right? Like, the light is gone from your eyes, and like, what's going on?" And I just didn't even have the words to tell her, like, how long do you have for me to sit there and tell you everything that is wrong with me right now? And I went through a whole semester of that. I went through a summer or winter break of that, and I got here this semester, and I was like, no more. I don't have to live like this. Like, I know things are terrible. I know that people are dying, literally. I know people are scared, but like, what can I do to circumvent that? What can I do to protect myself and like find joy? Like, I know that joy has become like this word that kind of like is so sought after that it like kind of doesn't mean anything anymore. But like, when I say joy, I mean a deliberate choice to find something to laugh at today, to find something to smile about, something to make me feel in love with something, my life, my friends, anything. And so the question, am I okay, is so deep. Like, it's so simple. It's small talk, considered small talk, but it is not small talk. And so this is not a plug. This is genuinely integral to my answer. But starting the Black Lavender Collective, I think, has restored my life force. I think that it has. The Black Lavender Collective is a Black feminist organization, graduate student organization that I started because I was tired of like having Black women's presence in spaces be, "Oh, well, speak for the oppressed. Why don't you speak to your experience so we can feel empathy?" I don't want to be the conduit for you to feel empathy or to feel bad for me or to talk about the state of the world. What if I was the person who taught you how to, see the bright side, or talk about your joy, talk about your friends, just talk about literally anything else. So for me, a liberatory practice that I've dedicated myself to this semester, and I think all my friends have seen that light come back to me, that passion, that lust for knowledge, that lust for love and people has just come back because I put my efforts not toward my anger, but utilizing my anger to build spaces where I can feel happy. I think that my happiness and my peace of mind and my protection of my spirit is a lot more important than taking myself out of the game because I'm too strong, because I'm too hurt to be an agent in the struggle or in the struggle. And I know that people go into these political organizations, you start organizing, and organizing means on the ground activism. Organizing means that you're making signs and doing this and sit-ins and all this. But organizing can also mean at 6 o'clock on Wednesdays, you and about 7 folks just sit down and y'all kiki, and y'all laugh and y'all have joy. You talk about something that pissed you off this week, and you sit in that moment and you love each other through that, and that is what makes you feel connected to people. That's what brings your humanity out of folks, I think. And so my answer to am I okay is not, but we gonna be alright. I think that I'm making strides. I'm making the campus a place that I want to be, because there's so many times on this campus that I felt alienated and overlooked and unimportant and all these things that I don't want anybody else to feel. So guess what? Here's this group. Here's this thing that you can come to if you feel that way. Here's something else. I think that when we talk about politics and organizing, it's always so negative and heavy and you're doing something in spite of something, you're doing it in opposition. Why don't we do something because we like something? Why don't we do something towards something? So I'm not okay, but me and the people that I meet through the Black Actor Collective give me the light at the end